What I'll provide you with very briefly, and there will be some more information available on the TAC website, with an overview of the compliance requirements for trainers and assessors, an overview of the requirements for industry engagement, and we'll focus on making the connections that you're required to make to demonstrate compliance, which is where people, they've got a rough idea of what each standard requires, because it's not rocket science, but how do I actually put them together in a way that's efficient and easy for me, given the environment that I'm working in, and also...
Are we getting a copy of that? Or
I can make it available on our website this afternoon. I don't have copies available for you now, but happy to make it available. As I said, they're not rocket science, these clauses, but how you put your evidence together, but more importantly, how you actually use it to create better training out in your organisations. I got a heads up today that the majority of you are vet coordinators? Yep. Yes? Okay, cool. So I'll try and really focus on things that you might actually be able to do within your school's environments. Can I also get a breakdown of who's a vet coordinator who's working through auspice arrangements with someone? Majority? Okay, no dramas. So I'll give you an overview of both of those compliance requirements and we'll see if we can actually pin some of them down together. What I've done here is just give you a bit of a shortcut to what this standard actually means. I want to really make sure people are clear. This standard hasn't changed much. If you are meeting the requirements under AQTF 2010, you will most likely be meeting the compliance requirements now. We did a strategic industry audit in 2014. We found variable levels of compliance, but we're looking at about 30% of non-compliance across this standard in its entirety. So obviously identified it as an area that needs a little bit of further work. They're not rocket science requirements though. The vocational competencies, at least to the level being assessed, is your qualifications that you hold. That will either be you holding the exact units that you're delivering, the exact qualification that you're delivering, or you've demonstrated equivalence. And I'll just spend a couple of minutes on demonstrated equivalence for you as we go through, but I want to concentrate more on where the standards require you to have that interaction with industry. There is no change to that first component, to point A of the standard. There's no change. We understand that there are some RTOs that are saying, as part of our arrangement to auspice with you and to partner with you, we require you to have the qualification and you won't be allowed to demonstrate equivalence. That is the prerogative of the RTO as part of their business arrangement, and some of them may actually make you gain the qualification. That's outside of our boundaries. We can't dictate the professional relationship that an RTO has with you, and we do know across the board that there's some RTOs that have chosen to do that. In regard to your current industry skills, what you have to be very careful, and we had some people when we did our audit that actually had the currency requirements. The problem was they tripped themselves up with how they provided evidence against those currency requirements. Just want to get rid of a few myths in the system. There's no relationship between currency and time. So you're never going to get, I have to have 2 years experience in the field. You're never going to get to be current in my industry, it requires an X. Currency is for you and your RTO to work together to determine what constitutes currency in your particular field, and then how you're actually meeting those requirements. So we expect 2 things from the RTO. First, how they've established what currency is in their field. Usually that's guided by, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail later, technological changes that might have occurred, changes in business practices driven by that technology, just updates that, we're doing things completely different. Had someone try to tell me the other day, I'm in marketing and nothing's changed in marketing in the last 20 years. And I then asked for a Twitter account and she didn't know what I was talking about. So we had a few problems there. I mean, these are things that your RTO should be keeping up to date and saying, this is what's considered current in our industry. Now we have to join the dots to make sure that you guys can line up or the teachers that you're working with can actually line up with those requirements. The current knowledge and skills in vocational training and learning. That's things like today, as is your industry currency. It's how you're actually keeping up to date with how to teach VET. Just teaching VET doesn't necessarily keep you up to date with how you teach VET, the different mechanisms that will be available, the different approaches that you might be taking to VET. So it's staying up to date with VET theory and practice. So in a nutshell, first one's your industry quals, second one's how do you know that you're current with what industry's doing out there, and the third one is just making sure you touch base with your VET theory and skills. Training and assessment qualifications. I imagine there's very few people in this room that don't have the TAE or are working with people that have the TAE. By 1st of January next year, you're actually required to have the qualification. You can't demonstrate an equivalence for that qualification. I think we're fairly across that. I think there was... Oops. We may never get back to the other slide.
Okay. About the LLN?
Yes, hasn't been released yet.
Right, okay, so there's no...
No, there was a rumour out there. Yeah. Someone made an announcement back in 2013 that by July 2014 everyone had to have the new LLN unit. Yes. The new LLN unit hasn't been released yet.
So you've already done it. What have you got to do? You've got to do it again in 2 years?
I think it's an equivalent unit under the new requirements. The new the draft training package that's in Train has the LLN unit. What they've done is shift that to a core competency, so you have to have it, which is the difference before. But if you did it under the old framework, I believe the unit itself hasn't changed significantly and it will be deemed equivalent. So there's no magic date as yet. There's no magic date as to when the training package will be released either, but that's not my field. Can't help you with that one. I don't think we really have... I would expect there would be very few people here that are delivering the TAE. No, it doesn't apply. What they've done is try to increase the standard by increasing the education qualification that anyone delivering that unit actually has to have, and they've just incorporated that to the diploma level. Okay. Professional development, this is your PD, your attendance at courses, workshops, your interaction with industry, very similar in nature. It's really, it brings together the requirements under 213 with B and C. Really looking at, if you've covered off really well on B and C under clause 1.13, you've probably met the professional development requirements under 1.16.
Could you put that slide back up, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's that you undertake professional development in your field, knowledge and practice of VET learning, and the competency-based training and assessment. This will be available for you, but it does give you some options there, looking at, as I said, courses, workshops, seminars. What I'm probably more interested in today in the time that we have is to talk to you about, it's not often that difficult for people to identify professional development opportunities, and hopefully more and more work's being done within the VET in Schools space to create those opportunities, such as what FAPS has done today. It's what you do with the information that you get today and how you actually keep records of evidence so that you can demonstrate your compliance with the standards, and how you can do that in a way that isn't incredibly onerous and becomes a whole nother life form in itself. Okay. Is anyone not clear on demonstrating equivalence requirements? Because it might be one that I can skip over and we can... Not clear on it? Okay. One of the things that you can do with VET, it will be dependent on your terms of agreement with the RTO that you're auspicing if you're working in one of those arrangements, is you may have a qualification that does not line up directly. It may not be the qualification that you're delivering, but you can demonstrate that through having that qualification or other professional and industry experience, you can demonstrate that you meet the equivalent requirements of the qualification that you're delivering. We really don't have that many issues with people not holding the vocational competency. It's how people are demonstrating it. Simply putting that you have a master's degree in business to deliver the Cert 2 in business isn't going to work. You have to map what the relationship is at the unit level for that qualification. So I won't use a business one, but if I look at, say, something like aged care, we did a strategic industry audit of aged care, kept coming up and up. The person that they said had the vocational currency and competency was a nurse practitioner. Now, if you know what a nurse practitioner is, it's probably the highest level of nursing, most senior level of nursing that you can get before you move into being a doctor. Very, very few of those people would actually have current skills in lifting elderly patients, in showering elderly patients, because quite often we found it was actually 10 years since they'd done it. Technology had changed, moving apparatus had changed, etc. So faced with the can you do this task now, there was no way that they could demonstrate that they had done it recently or had been trained in the latest technology to do so. So there's nothing wrong, it's not downplaying the value of your higher level qualifications that you have. All you have to do is map how those higher level qualifications are actually equivalent and make you competent today in the classroom to be delivering the level of the Cert 2 qualification. So it's how you demonstrate that. Most people do it with some kind of mapping or a matrix. But what I can say is be very careful how you draw up those matrices so that they don't get so complex that the policy and the matrix that you're using is actually what trips you up. We have, as a regulator, if someone presents us with a system that would actually meet compliance requirements, doesn't necessarily mean it's the best system to use. We don't make a ruling on, yes, this meets the requirements and it's an awesome system and it will be easy to use. We just say, using this system, you could actually demonstrate compliance. When we find that that's an Excel spreadsheet that has about 54 columns and requires probably about 3.5 days once a month for you to update, I can give it a tick and I can say that it's compliant, but it's never going to work for you and you're always going to be non-compliant when we ask for deployment. So you need to look at the unit, you need to unpack the unit, and you need to go, okay, what do I know I can do and how do I know I can do it? That's really all we're asking. I don't want people to be getting too confused with this whole matrix system. Take it back to basics, which I think I've got on the next slide, and just ask yourself the question, how do I know I can deliver this? How do I know that I have the knowledge and the experience to deliver what I'm about to deliver for this unit? Have that as your starting point and then interrogate the units one by one and add to them. Please, it's really, don't do them one by one if you can cluster them. If the units are comprised of knowledge and skills and tasks that you actually can really easily demonstrate your current currency and competency for 3 units as a, what's it called? No, you bundle them. Cluster. That's what I'm looking for. Cluster your units, because usually it significantly breaks down. If you have a task-based approach to it, what do I need to do the tasks that are in this unit? And it will usually mean that there's an interaction between 2 or 3 of the units at least. There will be some that are standalone, but usually you can cluster 2 or 3 units and then give your evidence next to that. Keep it simple is my recommendation. It's the only way that you're actually going to be able to maintain it. By maintaining it's the only way that you're going to be able to demonstrate compliance. When you are looking at demonstrated equivalence, you have to look at relevant past training and pre-existing industry qualifications, your experience and your professional development. You can pull from any of those areas. It doesn't have to be an education qualification. I was in some people might have heard this example before. I was in a meeting with some people talking about currency and competency, and the guy went, the trouble I had, I'm doing sports coaching. And the trouble I had tracking back my university qualification of 20 years ago to work out what was in each unit and how I could determine that those units were equivalent to what I'm delivering today. And I said, what do you do as a sports coach? And he said, I'm the national coach for this sport. Don't go to your 20-year-old qualification. I'm not saying there's a devaluation of that qualification. Go to your most recent experience. It's going to give you your currency as well as your equivalency with your qualifications. Dumb it down, simple it out. So that's probably at the level you're going to get to the most relevant information and then build on that information. It also, I think I've made that explicit a few times, it has to be done at a unit of competency level. You can't do it at the whole of qualification level. Okay. What are we looking for? We're looking for a clear and verified relationship between the trainer and assessor's formal or informal training and experience and the qualification or the units or modules that you're delivering. That's why we say you actually have to go down to the unit level and dissect with that. We're looking for the relevancy. There may be some work that you're delivering in regard to working with teams. I know the sport and rec qualifications all require working with teams. Look at all the other areas. It's certainly not going to be hard for most of you guys and the people that you're working with to demonstrate working with teams. Look for the most basic relationship that you have because it's probably going to be your strongest one.
We deliver a certificate to business, and I understand you can't use the business of the classroom as industry currency, but what I'm interested in is the business of being a teacher.
Yes.
And I see that as no different
Absolutely.
to the business of a local council or the business of a local organisation. So communicate in the workplace.
Absolutely, and I'll move on to that in just a minute when you're looking at... What I want to ask you to do now, given that I've only got another 15 minutes with you, and we will work with the Department of Education and also ASWA and Catholic Ed, I really think we need to have some full sort of hour and a half workshops on currency and competency, so I'll work with those sectors so we can get in front of you guys again specifically on this issue. But, now I've lost my train of thought completely. Okay, what I want you to be thinking about, so there's another, I'll actually move forward a bit. There's another standard in the standards that look at industry engagement. Everything I'm going to tell you about vocational currency and competency relates to industry engagement. You manage it the same way and you need to be managing them cohesively. There's no point you going, oh, now I'm going to meet all my evidence requirements against my professional development and my vocational currency. There's a real problem and you're making things heaps harder than they need to be if you're not incorporating that part of your industry engagement for the training and assessment of the qualification that you're actually delivering. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? No? Okay. What you'll be doing, you'll be going out there and under this standard, which is the industry engagement standards, RTO's training and assessment practices are relevant and meet the needs of industry and are informed by industry engagement. If you're out there doing industry engagement to work out what's the most current and relevant information to have in your training and assessment practices, you as an individual are also updating yourself through that exact same mechanism on industry's most current and practical ways of delivering. So you're actually crossing all of the things on the other slide, all of the requirements under standard 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, you should be doing them together because you're out there anyway. Why wouldn't you document? You get back to your office and you document the changes that you're going to make. What have you learnt today? The changes that you're actually going to make to your training and assessment systems. How do you know that you need to make changes? Because you've updated your currency and your understanding of what has to be delivered. So capture them both together. At the same time that you're doing your training and assessment adjustments, you should be making the adjustments to your vocational currency. Does that make sense? No? What's the difficulty there?
Well, first of all, I'm confused as to what you mean by when you say when you're out there. Out
Okay, so you have to undertake practices to make sure you have to be doing something, whether it was engaging in workshops, talking to industry directly, whatever those practices you use in your organisation to keep up to date with what industry are doing. What I'm saying is when you do those things, you're also actually updating your own currency. So use the two combined.
So if you were doing, for example, business studies,
Yes.
You could access 2 or 3 parents that run businesses, for example, in the school, and you could have a meeting once a term or something with them, just talk about your program, what you're doing, and so you're actually getting real life industry-based feedback. Is that?
Yes, that would be a contributing component to it. We would then want to see what you've done with that information and how you've updated your programs. So that might just be the fact that you're having the meeting possibly within a school environment as opposed to the business environment. You'd have to look at how that might limit what you're doing. Do you actually need to be on site to work out what the current business practices are and whether they're relevant? I mean, it goes to one of the examples that keeps getting used is a mechanism for making an assessment of whether students can answer the phone is to look at their written response. Not a great response to a question, what would I say if I had to answer the phone? Really, really poor technique of assessment for determining if someone can use appropriate phone skills. They need to be on the end of a telephone with someone on the other end. So it's the same situation. If you're getting that engagement with your parent group, make sure that they are actually talking to you on a business-to-business level, not a teacher-to-student level, a teacher-to-parent level, and certainly that will contribute to meeting the requirements for current industry practice. I wouldn't think that you could get everything you would need out of that, but it could certainly contribute to it. The thing is, after you've had that meeting, what do you do with it?
Like I understand about implementing it into your training program.
Yep.
A lot of us are dictated to by our RTO about our assessment.
Yep.
We're just told that's the assessment that you do. So, like I understand, I can bring that information into the training.
Yep.
And hopefully there's some open-ended questions that are provided in some of the assessments. But I find it quite limiting sometimes in that we're made to do a particular assessment or use an assessment tool.
Obviously, the tools that the RTO has given you, if you're working with a quality RTO, will meet the requirements of the training package. Comes down to what have you negotiated with the RTO. If you're going out and I take it we're in this room because the RTO has said to you, you have to do a component of the industry engagement. Is that clear in your memorandum of agreement? So I guess that I've stepped over that a little bit. Take back to what's your RTO told you that you have to do. I might have confused the point by telling you had to comply with the standard that your RTO is taking responsibility for. Someone in the process has to meet the requirements of standard 1.6, which require that industry engagement to make sure you're up to date and you're delivering what industry actually requires from the qualification that you're delivering. It may be that you're operating under arrangements where the RTO is ensuring that that currency is actually within the qualifications and the training assessment that you're delivering. My understanding was that you actually take on some of that responsibility. Is that not correct? Yes? So we're going to have variable situations. Someone such as yourself who has no ability to negotiate changes to the assessment with their RTO, and then others who it's really the whole patch is left to you, where you're going to have to meet these requirements. So it's about what's in that memorandum of understanding and what you've agreed to take on. If you've agreed to take on responsibility, which I can say 99% of you will for the vocational currency and competency of your staff, then you have to meet this industry engagement requirement. There may be some flexibility in regard to meeting the requirement for industry engagement for your training and delivery products, depending on what your individual arrangements are.
In the audit process, does the RTO have to document that industry engagement and give it to you? If that is the case, can they?
It will, if I can
provide
just.
that to us as well?
They can, and this is again, it all comes down to what's in your memorandum of understanding. If your RTO has gone to the level of saying you must provide this and you must provide me with the evidence of when you have engaged and what you have done with it.
I mean, for them updating their training and assessment strategies, if we're in a horse pursuing
Yep.
arrangement,
Yep.
They have to document that and provide that to you in an audit, so they're updating their training.
If the RTO, let's step back, it's the RTO's responsibility to give that to us. They may, as we understand how some of these arrangements work, require that you take on a responsibility for doing that, and if they have, we'll want to see that, but it's through the RTO that we'll want to see it. They may say, here's Jason, and he will do all this for you, but that's...
It just seems like a duplication if the RTO is already doing it and then pushing it on us to be responsible for it. Surely it is a good partnership where we can provide it.
It comes on your MOA. Who's, you know, that's for you to negotiate back with them. Well, hang on, is this what you're bringing to this deal, or is it what you expect me to bring to the deal? Make sure you're very clear on that. We wouldn't expect for it to be done twice, as we wouldn't expect there to be lots of the assessment tools from the one RTO. But it's how you engage with them to say, I've gone out and done some industry engagement, I've updated my currency in regard to my industry requirements, I think that we could make some changes, because you're going to be working with some RTOs that have no experience in the classroom. So you may actually develop an idea based on your industry experience of something, actually we could adapt this in the classroom and it could work very well. The RTMO may not be aware of it because they've been used to working in a different environment. So it can be a very positive thing that they're actually getting it from you, and you're actually teaching them how to adapt it to a vet in schools environment. They should then be informing you, yes, I can allow you to do that and we can still meet all of the compliance requirements. So we actually encourage people to work together. If we're ever going to get this vet in schools thing flat, and actually so that it's a good quality of VET that students are receiving, we've got to work more on that working together between industry and the actual schools and the RTO. That whole triangle's got to work better together.
If they don't, just get a new one. They're clamouring out there.
And actually there has been an increase in competition in that market. We have certainly seen that from the regulator's perspective. There's been more people entering the vet in schools field.
So is it possible for an RTO to provide all the industry engagement and currency and provide all the assessment tools and the school do very little?
They could. You'd have to pay for it, which usually is our sticking point. The RTO could provide that information. You, though, would be responsible in, as what I understand is 99% of the agreements, making sure that your staff are meeting their currency requirements.
From an industry perspective, we want our industries, what they say to us is that they want the person actually delivering to be okay with what the space looks like. So
Yeah.
RTO can do a lot of stuff, but we really like to encourage the teachers and to support the teachers to be able to be really up to speed with what's going on in their space, because you're the one, you know the students, you know the classroom, then you know the industry and you can teach. That's important from the industry perspective.
And it's part of that negotiation, and I know there's going to be people in this room that aren't personally involved in the negotiation of that MOA. It's something you need to be clarifying with the person in your school who is doing those negotiations. I can bring this to the table, or we want them to provide that service for us. Okay. As I mentioned before, in regard to updating your training and assessment practices and your own personal industry currency, things that might influence that are technological innovations, changes to legislation and regulatory requirements, changes to the industry practice itself, new and emerging skills and specialisations as work practices change, and looking at whether your technical skills have actually, there's a bit of a missing there now because you just haven't used them. You were a very proficient plastic duck maker in 2002, but you haven't made a duck for a long time, so you're a bit unfamiliar with the polymers that you're using nowadays as opposed to the ones they were using in 2002. Just things to keep in mind. As I touched on before, there's no one currency period, and we also understand that within your environment you are very unlikely to be presented with a situation where your school says, I'd love you to go and work at this organisation for 3 months. Don't worry about any of your teaching responsibilities. We know that that doesn't happen, so it's looking at specific group activities such as the forum today that you can participate in to upgrade that industry currency, and how you can then bring that back into the classroom. But don't forget to do those two things consecutively. If you're out there getting the information on what's happening within the area you're delivering, you're upgrading your own industry experience as well as making changes to the training and assessment. I've actually pinched a bit out of your flyer on industry currency. FAPS have an excellent, I can't recommend it highly enough, an excellent, fact sheet, guidance information on industry currency. And it really goes to the how do you do this in regard to providing your evidence. So what they're saying is evidence at attainment of PD event, it's not sufficient just to say if I come out there and audit your organisation and you've got, I went to the FAPS Industry and Skills Forum, I will say, that's really awesome, but you're non-compliant because I have no idea what you learnt at that forum, what the relationship is with the product that you're delivering, and how it actually increased your industry currency. They're the things that you have to actually look at demonstrating. So it's the how you demonstrate what you learnt and how you've applied it to your business structure. I don't want another big matrix on, out of this day, every day I'll do a matrix on what I learnt and which units it applies to. Maybe if you look at your delivery assessment strategy and you draw 2 columns down the side and you keep adding to that every time you attend a professional development event, and how you're going to change those components of your delivery and assessment strategy. That's the sort of evidence that really pleases us, because you're making that direct connection with what you've learnt at that PD experience and how you're actually going to change things in the classroom. Or it might just be how you've confirmed the way that you're doing things is in line with industry's requirements. You've confirmed by what you learnt at that PD day that we are actually up to scratch on this.
Excuse me. Part of the evidence of that, I
Yep.
get my trainers to, every time they have an industry contact, to map it out.
Yep.
And map it across to a UOC.
Yep.
So adding to that would be how they use that.
It's looking at, are you requiring that, is the information that you've gained actually going to change what you're doing in the classroom?
So that would be another thing that would add to that.
Yeah.
How they adapt that industry.
But all I'm saying is just have them put it next to the unit. Don't develop some matrix for every. I've seen that done as well. A matrix. But Gary keeps putting fingers up at me, so I'm obviously nearly out of time. If there's anything I want to get you to understand today is, after your PD event, review the information presented and the activities that you've done for the day. Review it in the context of your professional development, professional currency, and your training and assessment practices. Review it all 3 at one time. It will save you an enormous amount of time if you do it that way. What's the direct relationship of what you learnt today and how you're going to be teaching in the classroom, and then what's the direct relationship between that and updating your industry currency. Review the learner and assessment strategies and tools you're currently using, and record the following: new information you've obtained and how you'll be adapting your strategies. Look at the new information, look at how it aligns with what you're already doing to help you show that you've actually demonstrated that industry currency and you're most up to date with what industry wants. As I said, we'll work with the different sectors on doing it's probably a couple of hour session for you just on industry currency and competency, and we'll incorporate the industry requirements into that as well at a future date. I'm out of time, so thanks for the information today. What I can just update you on, there's a few projects that we're currently running. There's some professional development programs that are being coordinated with different industry training councils. There's the VET implementation guide. There's also the RTO research tools and all the projects we're running with the industry councils. It's not just the Business and Finance Industry Council. There are other projects if you're running other elements within your school. And if I can direct you to our website, it's just tac.wa.gov.au. It will be on the slide when I put the PowerPoint up this afternoon. There's a user guide, there's fact sheets, there's frequently asked questions in regard to the 2015 standards. Make sure you've got a clear understanding of the relationship. What have you taken on as an entity under your MOA, under the standards, and work from there.